So you and I talked last week, and it was pretty amazing because what you told me was you worked for the city of San Francisco as the CTO in the office of the CTO, and that you had spent a lot of time trying to collect data from folks that were serving the community. I was really intrigued by that because we have an underlining motive here to do the same thing. We want to first recognize the community groups that are here in the city. We want to understand what they do, and eventually we want to capture data. But it's a long it's a long trail, it's a long effort, and it involves a lot of education and training. So you've been doing this for a couple of years, couple of 4 years.
For actually for a lot longer than I would care to admit. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and thank you to John back there. John and I go back many years, and we've seen each other's careers evolve over time. So I want to thank John for the invitation. So you never know if you invite somebody how it's all gonna pan out. So anyway, thanks, John, for that. Um, so the struggle with trying to get data is really just the vehicle to really get like is the thing that you're doing actually working, and are we dedicating the right resources in the right place at the right time, and how do we need to pivot, and how fast can we actually move an organization if we're not actually going down the right path, and if we're focused on the wrong thing. And so I served as the chief data officer for the city and county of San Francisco for the last 2.5 years. Prior to that, I led the data and analytics team at the city's planning department. So I know a lot about permitting. I know a lot about land use and zoning. And so I'm happy to talk afterwards on that. But yes, getting data from every single department to really understand and actually make that data consumable and understandable by the public and also by staff was really like a key goal of ours. And with the city and county of San Francisco, we had over 62 departments that we had to work with. So A to Z services, everything from animal care and control to the zoo, the hospitals, permitting, crisis response, homelessness, the whole gamut. Um, and our primary focus was like, how do we know we're doing a really great job on improving quality of life in the city? And what data do we have to actually validate those policies that are being put forward almost on a monthly basis, if not daily? And how do we inform those policy changes over time? And can we track those changes over time, right? And are we heading in the right direction? Who defines the right direction? And what are those key metrics? So it was a lot of layers to really uncover as I was working across these departments. 35,000 employees across the city and county, serving over 850,000 people in the city. And so with the state of affairs as it is now, we had transitioned from emergency response during the pandemic to now a long tail of recovery. How do you build the city of the future today, knowing what we know now about remote work, which is permanent? Businesses have closed, so the downtowns across the country are suffering. Things are getting exacerbated at an accelerating rate. And so how do we build that new future, and what does that actually look like? So that's the main question that is faced, that every chief data officer, every department is being asked. They're being called to task now because we have dwindling resources, and we have to be very smart about where we invest these funds.
So that's amazing and very interesting for us as being funded and supported by the GeoBrowser community, because what we're looking for, here's our pizza again, is the ability to understand who are the organizations that are doing great work, what kind of great work are they doing, and then how do we get that story into some form of data that we could then measure effectiveness. It's a round trip conversation, and we're setting up just the infrastructure to do that, but getting organizations to participate and get them motivated is really interesting. Now, you told me one thing that I thought was really interesting is any organization that received more than $100,000 was expected to share data.
That's right.
How did that go? Because we would love to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah.
Let me just so Web3 and the way that we're designed with blockchain and our ability to have smart contracts, we can honor the privacy, responsibilities of an organization to protect their own organizational content and the privacy of their guests. But we can show activity as well as anonymized or uh, individual protecting identification of individuals that are going through the systems. We can show a collective storytelling. The reality is the technology now is around the corner to do this. The problem is, how do we find a way to work with the city and the nonprofit organizations and the people that need to participate in the programs? What are some best practices? What are things you can suggest? And the rest of this is going to be your slides. So I will get out of my slides, but we're just going to touch on it today because we'll do a whole breakdown of how we do this in the future at a separate We Heart SF. But just wanted to kind of like, what were lessons learned? And is that true, the $100,000 per organization? And tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so the city and county of San Francisco recently made it a requirement that any nonprofit organization that was receiving $100,000 or more needs to file with the city basically how are they spending that money, right? So what are your services and programs that you provide? How is that funding being distributed? And what are your outcomes? If I were to sum up that really detailed like list, that form that every nonprofit needs to submit to the city, and one of the reasons for that is because the city has a the city gives like billions of dollars to nonprofits, but it's very difficult to track how that money is being spent. Are you moving the needle? Should we, should the city pivot and focus on these nonprofits in these sectors versus others because they're not being as effective, right? And who defines effectiveness? Again, going back to that question of metric. And so there is this requirement now in the spirit of greater transparency on how city funds are actually being stewarded and spent. So, but the challenge is, and this is what we had found, is that my team, when I was still with the city, is that we were trying to build out a mechanism for nonprofits to actually do that well. But one of the challenges is that every nonprofit reports differently. Every nonprofit has a different way of calling things. So for example, nonprofit A can call a house, and nonprofit B can call it a tiny home, right? There's nomenclature, like standardizations. And so that was one of the challenges, is that, well, how do you bring all of that together? How do we know that nonprofits are actually calling things the same thing and actually seeing service in the same way? Right, so that there's a huge opportunity there, I think, and I think when we have an opportunity to do a deep dive on data practices, we can go through that. But I think, so one of the lessons learned there is that, well, either the city, because it's a city mandate, we mandate like, here's what your reporting requirements are going to be, and then funnel in your data, or we leave it up to the nonprofit to just submit what they think their best responses are. And so that's still an ongoing conversation. There's a standard form online now on the city's website to submit information, but at least that's the first step, is to try to get that information.
So today we're just kind of introducing a couple of slides you have, because you got a
That's
full
right.
extended deep dive capability, and getting integrated into San Francisco, making sure the data does get united into a way that you can tell that story. And I thought was really interesting that you've got the reporting layers, you've got some structure. We're going to dive into this a little bit later because these were amazing topics for us. But for now, what we do is let you know that we're not just trying to create a model where we're taking people out on the streets. We want to create a model in which we understand what's going on in all of our streets, and that we have a way to measure the effectiveness of organizations that are trying to work out there. So I know this, we only had a few minutes. Wanted to introduce you really quickly. Want to invite you to join us on any of our DAOs that we have out there. Again, DAO leaders are here. Today we have a special event after this meeting, which is going to be, how do we get people to physically get reinvited back to physical gatherings again? And the Eventbrite people will be up here. We'll record that session. I got one question in the back there, Noah. And okay, let me go Noah, and then one other. I know we're running kind of short on time. We got two more questions here. So a couple of things I wanted to point out is when I was talking with Tim from YWAM, there was a question about wish we had more hygiene kits. And I know you were looking, Noah's in the back, was looking for places to store hygiene kits because you could do more of them, but you run out of places to store them. And so it's like, that's the kind of thing we can fix. We can find storage locations and we can help be able to get those in place. But without these kinds of meetings, we would never know that. We'd never be able to connect conversations that are weeks apart and miles away from each other that we're still super close. I think Noah had a question in the back. There we go.
Just quick question. Where will the Eventbrite recording be found?
Same place as this recording. So we'll just, we'll put it on our Geo channel as well. So it'll be on there for other folks. We have some question up here.
Hello.
Yes.
So it sounded like when you're looking at the data, you're doing almost like a Six Sigma where you're going to be tracking the data, making changes and seeing if you make a change downstream. And I think that was, we saw, was it Ken Nim who was here before? And he presented the data that they had up to date, but they didn't have some of the later follow-on data. And so I think that when we track kind of any of the progress that we do from any of the solutions, that's the only way we're going to be able to come back and modify our process upstream. So I don't know if you ever went through that GE thing, but
Yeah, no, it's good. And I think Kathy Rothberg kind of brought to our attention her own metrics, which was how many homeless have gone the full journey in the course of a decade to buying a home. And she's got 3,000 individual stories on what unfortunately it's on paper. We have to get it digitized, but she was killing me. I was like, it's on paper. Oh my gosh.
We can OCR it.
She's going to bring me like 6 inches of paper and I'm going to like, oh, good Lord, help us. Okay.
We'll just
But
scan it and
I
then
know.
just use some sort of machine
But
learning.
yeah, so we're in the process of doing that. She's got some consultants going over there and helping her to assemble it. But she was willing and able and has been tracking that. So it's been amazing. We just want to see that more organizations tracking success downstreams. Any more questions for Michelle? Yes. Is the information public?
So if you go to datasf.org and then you click on find data, we have over like almost 1,200 data sets on there that are publicly available. You can download them. You can connect via API. You can do whatever, however you want to connect to the data, you'll have it. It is clean and trustworthy data to the fullest extent that we can, humanly possible, work with the departments. So it's been vetted, it's being monitored, and
you used to run the Data Academy to teach people how to do that.
Yeah, so I ran Data SF, which is the centralized data and analytics team for the city and county of San Francisco, and we worked across all of the departments.
So that's amazing. So we will have Michelle back.
Yeah,
Eric, one more question.
Just one question. So have you had data scientists analyze all these data sets and try to figure out how to use AI to normalize these discrepancies?
Yes, so we have there are 3 services. One is the open data platform that we manage. So that's the data infrastructure and then making sure the data sets are readily available. We have our data academy where we do training for staff. What tools and platforms should you be using? And then the third one is our data science portfolio, where we handpick like the most critical needs. So one of them was the street crisis response, where we were working with 4 departments across 9 teams across the city and county of San Francisco, who were frontline workers who need real-time information around who are we helping, where is this person dropping off, what's that funnel? And so we were just beginning that process. And in that regard, it was every team was collecting their own data on the street, and you couldn't harmonize it because they're collecting different data from the individuals. So we had to, using machine learning, right? And we were also experimenting with Gen AI on trying to figure out like, how can we reconcile identities to a single person so that we can actually track, is this person being helped? Are they still alive? Are they landing up in the hospital, or are they in jail or somewhere else, right? And then using that information to then really streamline collaboration across these teams. So that's really what they were doing, was they were spending time spreadsheets. Yep.
If we get a mic over here to John, that'd be great.
Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. It's such an honor to see you do what you feel called to do by sharing data and accountability with people. I'm not going to put you on the spot for this. The only thing I'm going to ask is so do you think there's going to be more accountability that you see to a certain level or degree? Do you want to talk about how this is going to, what your hope would be for this to continue to be more effective? Like it's doing good now. Your hope would be this or that, because there's context that I know of where one of my friends, their director is being reviewed now by the FBI, and there's other people in San Francisco that are being reviewed for whether their policy that they've done is ethical or not. And so I think that you and your great service and the city can do better. But yeah, we now know that like FBI is like investigating people in San Francisco. So people in the city are talking about it. What's your hope for like how ethical data can help people be more accountable?
I would say that, so I shared with John privately that data is my ministry. So wherever I go, that's what I'm going to do. And so training people, my hope for not just San Francisco, but for other organizations, which is why I want to take what we're doing in San Francisco and scale that like across as many agencies, nonprofits as we can. We need to build capabilities, right? So if we're gonna have this wonderful technology, we need to work with the individual nonprofits and other social impact organizations themselves to build up their data capabilities so that they can have clean data to serve up and then connect. Like that, we need to start at the source and then have that vetted. And so that's my hope for organizations.
So I think we have one more question. Is that okay? I know we're almost out of time. Go ahead, Nikki.
All right. I
Nima.
just wanted to know if you have ran into the homeless management information system. How do they connect with you?
So if you go to datasf.org, we do have a shelter waitlist data set that's there. That's updated. I forget what the cadence is. I think it's every few hours or I'll have to do, but it's there. So you can see. Yep, we work
Okay.
with them.
One more question all the way in the back. Yes.
Well, thanks, Michelle, for coming. I'm going to look at datasf.org when I get home. It's super cool.
You're gonna see it.
But
I'll give them a heads up.
as someone who is close to the data itself, what have you seen, or are there any stories about the data, are there any stories from the data that you see about our city, like in terms of like where we're at in its current state, and where do you hope we should be?
Oh man, I could write a book on that. I would say that the city has a lot of data. Some departments are a lot better at managing them and telling that story of here's how we are delivering on that service. But those departments tend to be ones that have technical capacity. They have the engineers in place, so they know good data practice. So it's built by design. There are other departments or services where they don't have that capability, but they're really, really good at their mission and what they want to deliver. It's just they don't have that capacity. So I do see this disparity, this gap in knowledge and capability. And that's why I'm focused so much on foundations, building a solid data foundation and educating people. Because it's not rocket science. You just need to know what you're aiming for and then actually track the data, collect it explicitly and being very intentional about that and making that part of your business practice every day, right? So there is a story there, but I am hopeful. I do see opportunity there where the goal is to build those capabilities within those organizations overall.
And Geo is very committed to doing that. We're taking the long journey around. First, we're going to get to know everybody individually. We're going to get to know the organizations that want to help. And we're going to start to collect and normalize the data that's out there because the data has something it wants to tell us. Good or bad, it tells us kind of the direction it's heading. It's a new language we have to learn how to speak and listen to. But you guys, thank you for coming to We Heart SF. This has been amazing.